Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Welcome to the episode. Welcome to the show. If you're new to the show, be sure to subscribe to Keys to the Shop on your favorite podcast player. You can follow Keys to the Shop on Instagram at Keys to the Shop, and also here on YouTube if you're watching. Don't forget to ring the notification bell and subscribe and all that fun stuff. Stay tuned with what we have going on because we're always putting out great content on a very regular basis. Proud to say we haven't missed an episode in 8 years, almost 8 years. Actually, January 3rd, it'll be 8 years of Keys to the Shop. So go to keystotheshop.com also and search the topic that you want to listen to. In the search bar, you can find topics from pretty much any range of things that relate to running a great coffee shop on keystotheshop.com. Eventually, we're going to just kind of revitalize our website because we're getting so many episodes. We need to make it a little bit more intuitive. But for now, that's where we have it. And the best thing, though, of course, is your podcast player. Search those episodes out in your player, and it will give you a nice list. And if you ever just have the hankering to email me, it's chris@keystotheshop.com. Just ask me which episodes you should listen to. Honestly, I really mean that. Email me and say, hey, I'm wanting to learn about this thing. What do you think the best episodes are for that topic? And I will send you a curated list of what I think might be the best thing for you. So now, one of the things that we do at Keys to the Shop on top of the podcast is consulting. And with the new year coming upon us and, looking for a good strategy for your business, one of the best things you can do is to employ a consultant to help you get perspective on the work that you have done and are doing and where you want to go with your business. What things do you need to refine? How do you bring excellence to your operations, your people, your quality? And this is what I work with people all the time on, whether you're just starting out or you're somebody who has been doing this for quite a while and you've seen some success, but you know that you need some help taking things to the next level. This is where Keys to the Shop consulting and coaching comes in. So email chris@keystotheshop.com. I love working one-on-one with owners and operators like yourself. We'll set up a free discovery call and we'll chat about how I might be able to help you. And be aware also, in March, we're going to be starting that new keyholder coaching group season. So if you're an operator and you've been going for a few years and you've got some experience behind you, but you want community for accountability, encouragement, problem solving, and solutions, it is what we're all about. A keyholder coaching groups is a mastermind of coffee shop owners from all over that gather to help each other succeed. So if you're interested in that, you want to be part of the early access crowd for that season, same email, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by a couple of different companies. First, Arto.com. It's Arto Brick on Instagram. They do tile and stonework and hard surfaces for coffee shops, and they are fantastic. Also, the Pacific Barista Series, plant-based beverages, and they're wonderful folks as well. You are going to hear more about both of those companies later in the episode today. But for right now, I want to introduce our guest to the show for Founder Friday, the last Founder Friday of 2024. And I'm really excited about this one because today's guest has a ton of energy and has accomplished so much with their business. We are talking with Raoul Adwan, who is the owner of Thrd Coffee. Now, Raoul Adwan is a Chicago native of Mexican and Bolivian descent. He turned a passion for coffee into a thriving business. He launched his venture during the pandemic. So Thrd Coffee started during the pandemic with the help of a stimulus check. So a lot of hustle going on there, and you're going to see he has good energy for this stuff. Starting off with a single coffee cart, offering street side brewed coffee and coffee menu. Thrd Coffee took off. What began as a pop-up, quickly the operations just gained traction. And within 4 years, Raoul's business expanded to a brick and mortar. And that location has been thriving. And they're currently actually in their works for a second location second coffee shop, complemented by continuing to do these multiple carts that are equipped with top tier coffee gear. So today, Raul is leading this company, Third Coffee, as a brick and mortar, top tier catering operations throughout the downtown area with corporate spaces and buildings, employing these carts for their employees and their events, etc. And what's really cool is that this innovative approach that Raul brings is this commitment to quality. It's positioned his company, his business, for really great growth. Their projected 2024 sales is over 600,000, and total gross revenue starting from 2020 is hitting 1.15 million. So Raul's journey is a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit and this community-driven success that he has experienced and is continuing to cultivate. I think is going to be very beneficial for you to hear about, because this is the kind of story that I think a lot of operators, they want to get to this place, and starting from a cart to this brick and mortar and continuing to operate in this way and make an impact and employ people and create community. I mean, this is definitely something that's going to inspire you. So today's conversation is going to cover all the bases from the beginning of Raul's journey till today and all the lessons that he's learned in between. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the founder of Third Coffee, Raoul Adwan. All right, Raoul, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. The weather's nice here in Chicago. You can't complain.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, and weather being nice, does that mean it's just not windy, not as windy as
That's
usual?
right. Yeah, no, I think it's funny. In the month of November, October and November, it's a little different. It's a little wonky. Sometimes you have to rock the shorts, and then sometimes you're rocking the sweaters. It's just it changes and it varies, and so we don't know what's gonna happen. Last week it was 60 degrees, and now we're kind of like below 40. So it's crazy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Consequences of lake life, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so you have with Third Coffee,
Hmm.
um, this has been a project born from being nimble, being out and about, networking, chasing the dream. And recently, you just went from the not brick and mortar, you went from the mobile to brick and mortar, and it's about a year since you've had the brick and mortar open. So, congrats on that.
Thank you.
It's pretty huge. And so it's been quite a journey for you, and I've seen all of the what you've been posting and how things have evolved for you. But tell us a little bit about how you first thought coffee was a thing that you wanted to pursue in the first place, and what led you to be like, this is what I need to do as an owner. I need to start Third Coffee.
Yeah, first and foremost, Chris, it's such an honor to get on this with you. I said this offline, I'll say it again. I listened to you since day one. Huge fan, and what you're doing for small businesses and for small business owners, and just picking brains of other folks, it's amazing. And so I have to say, first and foremost, that where I'm at in the business, I can't say I would be able to do it so well without all the other episodes that you've been able to put out there. So just want to say special thank you for that.
Uh,
Um, but all I can say is, yeah, so I was a senior in college and I was a barista. But before that, I went to go study abroad in South America, Bolivia, to get to meet my family for the first time there. And I'm
oh,
born and raised here in the city of Chicago. And in my cohort group, I got to meet some great guys that were doing pour overs every morning, and they introduced me into the art of third wave coffee, and that motivated me to kind of explore that industry. And I went into being a barista senior year, and I really loved, connecting with folks, getting to grow in the community. And when I graduated out of college with a communication degree, I wanted to go into sales and business development. Dabbled in corporate America. I realized immediately that wasn't for me, but I wanted to apply those skills into the coffee industry. So I threw myself into the lion's den, worked with a few roasters, and I did a little bit of wholesale, And from there, I learned a little bit of from distribution to account management and equipment purchasing. And I was able to manage a few accounts in the Chicago area, learning about brick and mortar businesses. I oversaw about 120 coffee shops and having a couple clients and checking in with them. And in that, I kind of became a sponge. And I was like, man, if I were to do this, what would it look like? And I thought I thought I thrived pretty well in the sales side of it. And again, a fan of craft coffee.
So that overview of the industry kind of gave you some ideas of what you wanted to do in craft coffee. I mean, that's a at a certain point it's a daunting task because you got that so many different examples to choose from. It's hard to decide what will be the thing that I do. So you say I'm going to move from my coffee experience and my sales experience to now applying it to something that I'm creating. How
Correct.
do you take all that stuff, put it into that package with confidence that this is how I want to do it?
That's a good question. I think ultimately, every business owner wants to have their own brick and mortar coffee shop. I think that's kind of like the little American dream of like living a quiet life and being able to serve in your community. Context, I started this in the pandemic, and um, a mentor of mine always told me, if you can find a niche, demand within your industry, generally speaking, there's something there. And so for myself, I wanted to have a brick and mortar shop, but in the city of Chicago, we learned one thing, and we can't just solely bake on foot traffic. We have to bring our product and our service to people,
Mm.
instead of having them, instead of us waiting for them to come to us, especially during the in that time 2020, it was very, it was tough, right? One of
Mm.
my former employers in the distribution coffee industry, one of the things that they specialized in was mobile solutions. So before that, we ended up going into festivals, and we would bring coffee trailers, and we would go into conventions and conferences and be able to serve nitro and all these amazing funkadelic drinks mobily. And they didn't really tap into it too much because it was so laborsome. So, in the midst of the pandemic, I kind of connected the two, and I realized, there might be a demand in mobile solution, and so that's where I wanted to kind of start off first. I didn't want to immediately tackle the brick and mortar yet, nor did I want to go into roasting or any of those things. I saw a demand, and I saw how can we provide a product to places that are limited, whether that was outside, rooftops, courtyards. We had to be outdoor, and so I built out a cart, and I was like, all right, let's do this. It's not a game. It wasn't like a mind blowing. It was a mind blowing idea for me, but this concept has been built out in multiple states, from Florida to California, a lot of East Coast and West Coast. So yeah.
So that was it. The entry into the industry was a need in your community to have coffee brought to people. And for you, it was creating something simple enough that it was able to be mobile and nimble and responsive to those needs. So you started with the basics with what you did with Third. How did you experience your first outings when you started to do these pop ups and these mobile events and the like?
Yeah. So first year, happy to provide some numbers. So first year I did in 2020, we did the last 3 months of that year. That's when I kind of like launched it. Only generated 5K in revenue, just because of pop-ups that were not consistent. I would only be able to do it during the weekends, and so there were some hurdles. I again had to pick a few brains from a few of my colleagues on the West Coast and East Coast. There were a few mobile coffee carts in the city, but they didn't pave the third wave craft coffee scene in the way that we would hope that they would. I would say that they specialize more in smoothies or second wave tier, and so one of the things I wanted to do was kind of be a mobile leader in that. And in the city of Chicago, it's a little bit more dynamic. There's a lot of more loopholes when you have to go through commercial buildings, COIs, all those things, and so that's why there was a little bit pushback in being able to service that the first year. Second year, that's when things started blossoming. Right, we were getting into commercial buildings, residential buildings, and condos and lobbies. We had our paperwork in order, and so there, then we grew and we blossomed up to like I want to say about 50K in revenue in the year two, and that again was just growing as the city was reopening in itself.
So, talk to me a little bit about first. One thing is the third wave, the way that you would hope it would be produced, in a cart. What is the to you? What is the difference? What were the things that you were doing on the cart that you thought this is a real differentiator?
Yeah, great question. We would educate a lot of our guests about, this is where the bean is coming from. This is the local roaster that we're using. We would change out our roasters, and then we would be able to kind of showcase some drinks that they didn't know, and let them know, hey, this is what a traditional macchiato looks like, and trying to kind of revert them from, Frappuccino macchiato style, and being able to again showcase traditional style drinks, talk a little bit about the story of bean to cup, from
Mhm.
where are we locally sourcing. Being able to partner up with local oat milk companies, and I would say a lot of in Chicago, there's a lot of local shops that utilize similar distributors and same different brands, and so we wanted to try to put that out in the cart so that people know that we were pretty local.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so now, is it just you working the cart? Who is it working with you here?
Yeah, the first couple years it was myself, and then I just brought on like five people, five baristas that wanted to take a side job, and I would just kind of like send them out and be like, "Hey, I got a gig at a school outside the parking lot. Would you want to join? First come, first serve." And then I would pick out then one of the
Okay.
baristas that were available that day. They would help tag along with me.
Okay, so these are all they're not employees, or they're 1099 employees or workers.
Yeah, at the time it was 1099.
So when you've got these people who are not like working full time like they would in a coffee shop where there's a lot of institutional wisdom, they just kind of like have the groove of it, but then so they're instead activated based on, hey, I've got this event I want you to go to. They may not have worked for a week or longer potentially. I mean, you really have to rely on their memory and their barista skills, but there has
Right.
to be some other kind of way that you can contribute to helping consistency. So, how do you control consistency, at least initially in this first phase, with a group of people who are kind of part time? They're 1099 employees. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good call out on that one. So what I ended up doing was, set the standard pretty. I set that standard real from the very beginning when I wanted them to join the team. One of the first things when I did the little minor, interview, kind of seeing if they would be available, was I told them that right now, with everything that was happening at that time, we weren't sure when the next gig was going to happen, and
Yeah.
but would you be available and be open to seeing this possibility? And I was so thankful to get these solid five baristas to see the vision. And I told them like this was the game plan of what I want to do. This isn't just one of those I just kind of want to do as a side project. No, I created a business plan, a very competitive one. This is what 3 months can look like. This is what 5 months can look like. And I did a formal meeting after they all signed their name on the dotted line. And what I ended up doing was we were at a back area patio space, and I did a projector, and I was like, this is what I'm envisioning. Again, I know that this may not be a risk right now, but it would allow you to just be able to take on a side job and seeing where it goes.
You're envisioning this is based on what you know is possible from your knowledge of the industry.
Correct. I was I was an optimistic guy. I was like, yeah, I really believe that we might come back from some type of way where people would gather again. And I know that there is a demand here. And so I did my research prior to kind of showcasing this to the staff.
Right. And obviously this is something you use as a guide for what decisions you make year to year to say, hey, we've got a plan. There's potential for growth. We're a mobile operation right now based on the fact that that's all we can do. But what moves did you make while you were continuing to grow that the cart business, in order to get to the point where you could do a brick and mortar?
Yeah, so when I would connect with clients, I really tried to build that relationship with them to have retention, where I would say, okay, cool, great. I just connected with the property manager that loves to do every year a hot chocolate bar. Okay, great. I would love to like continue staying in touch with them throughout the year. Keep us in mind for next year. For if you have a yearly budget, you know, we love to just throw you some of our new seasonal items. And so my goal was not only to solidify and execute an event, but it was to stay in touch and build those relationship with these clients, that they would keep us in their back pocket for the next upcoming quarter or year. And thankfully, we had those. We have till this day, we still have clients from day one, from year one, that have been able to keep us for a future event. Not only were they were doing one type of event, but we would partner up with corporate clients that would want to do something for a pop up, a resident program for weeks, potentially 2 months, 3 months. At that time, there was Starbucks was not opening up their brick and mortars, their storefronts in these commercial buildings. So the property manager kind of had to say, we need a filler. You know, we have tenants that need coffee. You know, and so we were that middle solution. We were small enough to accommodate, but we weren't big enough to, you know, uh, be able to fill in 5, 10 buildings at that time. But it was good to keep us busy, and so yeah, we did some of those creative partnerships with them.
So keeping all of these folks in, you know, a file or a system. Sounds like a lot of your sales background is coming in handy here when you're talking about client relationship, like management softwares, or just the habit of promoting yourself. And I hear it in the way that you're speaking, if I can just point out, because, you know, working with clients a lot who don't have sales background, there is a rampant lack of confidence in advocating for your own business, that people just can't get over because it feels weird to them. And sometimes you do have to be a little bit, I wouldn't say aggressive, I would say assertive in a benevolent kind of way, to say, well, now that this engagement is over, I'm not just going to let it go. We're going to keep you on the back burner. I hope you keep us on the back burner. Um, am I right in that? Is that kind of a thing that is just kind of at this point natural for you?
Yeah, I believe it's definitely a character thing. It's a mentality and attitude towards, you know, coffee. And again, it's not. I think it depends on what you want as a business owner. If you want to be a brick
Mhm.
and I just recently last week, I was just with a colleague of mine, and he opened up his coffee shop 2 years ago, and he was celebrating his 2 year anniversary. And he was telling me, I asked him, what do you want to do at the end of it all? And he's like, you know, I just want to be a neighborhood coffee shop. I want to be a third space where I want to come. I want people are regulars. And I said, that's amazing. That's awesome. Stay, you know, like if you're just solely want to be that rock in that neighborhood, go for it. Myself, I would say I want to do that, but also my ambitious side is like, I want to see how far I can push the envelope, scalability, without having you know, a group or investors or any of those things. And we've done pretty
Mm.
well. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was like, okay, yes, I want to be a rock in my neighborhood, but at the same time, I do feel that we need to go out there and push and sell, because, and I do also believe that there's a level of educating about specialty coffee. And then there's a time where you need to, you know, talk about the business fundamentals. Okay, we need to look at our quarterly sales. Let's hit the next goal. You know, what was last year's clients? You know, have when was the last time that we touched base with them and check in with them? So yeah, that was just, it's like a mentality thing that I think it's
Uh-huh.
very rare to have within the coffee industry. Um, but I believe that there's a good mix of a little bit of education and coffee, but also with a little bit of business skills.
And I'm glad you said that because it is whether you want to be a neighborhood coffee shop or you want to see how large you can make something, and that's your goal. In both cases, you're going to need that skill anyway,
Correct.
because there's a lot of noise out there that people need to they need to pick out the signal from the noise, your brand being one of them. So you might be a small coffee shop with a roasting operation, wondering how to grow wholesale, or just get people's attention to fill out a dead season in or a dead space in your afternoon sales. There's a lot that you're doing that I think people could learn from in the whole like assertiveness and good business skills, maintenance of relationships. So I'm really glad that you mentioned this stuff. Yeah, and speaking of relationships, I'm curious about how people reacted to your service. The third cart, the coffee cart goes out, people experience it. You're taking in their reactions, you're probably adjusting as you go. What was the initial feedback like, and what kind of pivots did you make in order to refine things as you went?
Yeah, so back in the time or around that time, there was a lot of, and I joke around with this, I say respectfully that back in Chicago, a lot of brands were very grungy. Were very kind of like I always joked around like Bon Iver, the artist Bon Iver, very esque, very dark and grungy vibes. And so one of the things I wanted to do was, hey, how can we be different brand wise? And I wanted it to be a little brighter, a little bit colorful. If you go on our website at thirdcoffee.com, you're able to thrdcoffee.com, you're able to see the bright pink, lavender, purple colors. It really catches your eye. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of coffee businesses like that. Now we're seeing a wave of brick and mortar shops using a lot of monochrome colors, a lot of bright floral colors, and I think that that's really cool. If when someone asks me, how did you come up with those color palettes? Shout out to a Chicago native, Chance the Rapper. He came out with this album called The Coloring Book, and the album cover is just very. I love the artwork in that, and I wanted to try to translate that into coffee and create that space for it. So, and again, this is different for every whoever a listener to living in an urban area or a rural area. Some folks would say that we get some influence from Los Angeles or from Mexico City, Spain, Europe. Whereas and I'm sure that could be different for an area that might be a little bit rural. But I can say that there was a demand in regards to branding and marketing. Um, in the city, and I wanted to be a cart that can provide those kind of like colorful waves and hopefully translate into experience when they come in. They're like, wow, this is a very millennial coffee cart. And I said, yeah, for sure, let's do it. So yeah, I always said we were like the young kids in the coffee industry.
Nice. Yeah, right. And let me ask you, you said, I knew there was a need for this. And what you've told, let me just ask quickly, how do you know there was a need?
Oh man, I don't know. I my entrepreneurship, I used to watch Shark Tank all the time, and I would have mentors in corporate spaces, and I say, like, I want to start a business one day. And I think this started when I was a kid. Like I try to do like a beanie during college. I try to create an app, and none of it flopped, but none of them were very successful. And I just like they all I just looked at something, and a mentor once said, like, once you see a need, there's an opportunity there, and if you could provide the solution to that need, that's something to work off of. And so it's looking at the little things and trying to find something like that. So I saw like there's a demand here, like we should change up our color palettes. Like there's everybody feels like in Chicago, everybody's brands are very similar. Everyone's using the same distributors. Everyone's using the same thing. And I feel like if you want to have that competitive edge, you have to be a little different. Also be a team player within the coffee culture within your city for sure, but still be a little bit competitive.
What's really interesting is that I don't know if you just asked people, hey, I feel this way. Do you feel this way too about colors in Chicago? You know, it's probably not the case that most people would do that. You've got an intuition that you trust. Your thoughts reflect the thoughts of others.
Hmm.
And if I'm feeling this way, others must be feeling this way as well. And
Mm.
so you act upon that intuition. It, it is not self-serving. It's like you're trying to serve people through how you view things. So it's like a vote in favor of your taste in, Chance the Rapper's album and that kind of stuff. But then it's also married with this idea that, yeah, I trust that, like, I'm a person, I live here, I know what it feels like to be here. Others must feel the same way too. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes far deep into where one person lives. So I grew up, again, city kid. My dad was a bus driver here in the city, and so I think that there's this dynamic shift in the city, like city of Chicago, where everyone is coming from other Midwest areas into the city, Wisconsin, Milwaukee of some sort, and it all has a similar coffee culture here in the city of Chicago. And so for myself, I didn't see a coffee leader, somebody from southwest side of Chicago, open up a brick and mortar, and I felt identified with their vision. When I walked into their cafe, I'm like, wow, this is a Southsider cafe, or this is a Northsider cafe. On the north side, it's a little bit more luxurious and specialty, but I want South Side is a little bit urban, and so I'm a little mixed mutt from growing up in the city. Have friends from all over part of the city, and I wanted to interpret that in my cafe space of like I want to get them. I want people to come in and feel like, yeah, this is somebody that is Hispanic owned, but also an inner city, has some hip hop culture influence to it, but at the same time there is a level of specialty and luxury and minimalistic approach to it. There's all these different concepts that I felt I'm just a byproduct of my surroundings, and I wanted to kind of like mush that into a cafe, and so I'm glad to be a differentiator. And now I don't want to take credit for this, but I love how it has motivated other business owners in the city of Chicago to create these amazing spaces, cafe spaces now, that I feel like I'm like, wow, that definitely is a Chicago cafe, or that's definitely
Mhm.
something that you would experience here.
Well, hey, everybody, it's Chris, and I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors today. We'll be right back to our episode, but we can't do these shows without wonderful companies that help support the podcast and bring you this great content. We like to work with people who are doing great work for coffee shops, and we're going to start with our friends at Arto Brick. Arto.com is where you can go to see their whole portfolio of offerings. But even better, you can follow them on Instagram at Arto Brick, ARTO Brick. They facilitate wonderful surfaces, floors and tiles and stonework for all sorts of different dwellings, buildings, and cafes and restaurants. So, making a cafe really pop and stand out has to do with details, something very unique and beautiful, texturally rich. This is what Arto is all about. So follow them on Instagram at ArtoBreak. Reach out and say Chris DeFurio at Keys to the Shop sent you, and they will take great care of you. If you're in the market for, figuring out what is our floor going to look like, what's our bar going to look like, what about the walls, these guys have you covered. Again, that's Arto Brick on Instagram at Arto Brick. Okay, so now we want to thank our friends over at the Pacific Barista Series. Long have they been the foundational performance plant-based beverage in specialty coffee. They have supported the people of specialty coffee and the craft of specialty coffee. They've always been generous with their donations and time and energy, supporting competitions and individual baristas, and they produce these products to satisfy that professional need that baristas have for great quality beverages. So the Barista Series stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture for latte art. It also creates a balance of flavor in the cup that keeps the focus on the coffee. So Pacific foodservice.com is where you can go to get samples for yourself and your team and see how you like it. I think you're going to taste it and be like, yeah, this is the great stuff. This is going to perform very well on your bar. And if you're in the market for great plant-based beverages for your customers, and who isn't, I think you need to try the Barista series from Pacific. So let's get right back to our conversation with founder of Third Coffee, Raoul Adwan. Yeah, something in the air. Yeah,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
it's so cool. I want to take that idea of mushing to everything together because the collection of experiences that you had with your mobile operation now, when it comes time to open a brick and mortar, you're at another precipice. You're at the
Hmm.
crossroads
Yeah,
of decision where you were originally when it was time to open the mobile operation, but this time it's brick and mortar.
correct.
So how do you go about taking all the lessons learned from initial conception to now a brick and mortar version of that? What's the same and what's different about the brick and mortar version of Third?
Well, so context of the business. So we operate three different services. The first one is obviously the mobile coffee solution where we do events and catering. The second one is barista concierge service where we dispatch a barista into office spaces and we're able to provide them kind of like an amenity service of having their own in-house barista. But then,
Mm.
and then the third one, which is the most popular one, is our brick and mortar where we're able to have that for the community. Right now, we only have one. Goal is to have a couple more. Um, and it was all built over time where I was able to have consistency and rhythm for one service. And then I was like, okay, I found another opportunity. A client came up and asked, hey, do you guys do like in-house office barista services? And I said, well, let's see if we can make this one happen. And thankfully, we've been coming out with some positive results from execution to even the client that adores us. And so we kept those two services, and eventually, like the revenue, it was like this healthy mechanism of a revenue of one service feeding another. And now we have like a snowball effect. And I said, okay, I think this is a right time to have a coffee shop because now we have lines of revenue. Something that I used to say back in the day, and I still believe it till the death of me, like I will die on this hill on this belief, is that if you were to have a brick and mortar shop, it should be like an iceberg where on the tip you see it, it's visible, but on the bottom of the water is like this huge anchor that sustains the business and it feeds into that. And I think that is so true when it comes to having brick and mortar storefronts, is that you need to have some form of line of revenue that feeds into this and is able to provide all the overhead and all these things to cover your biggest cost. And thankfully, I've been able to do this in such a way strategically where I was able to cover the biggest the biggest cost, which is rent. And I'm like, great, like we have these two amazing services. Now we can have a brick and mortar, and let's just continue this mechanism. Um, and so I think we see that, but we don't talk about it. We see that in roasters. A lot of roasters have brick and mortar, at least here in Chicago that I know of, and a lot of them are being supported by their wholesale program. That's their anchor. And so and again, I think that we need, as a business, we have to be creative on how we're gonna keep everything sustainable and profitable.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and profitable. And so that kind of leads to the question of, okay, well, obviously each component of the business needs to be, within its own right, successful. And as you started the brick and mortar, how did the initial few months go to start to get to the point where it was justifying its own existence and not just being a something that was expressed by the good graces of your other income streams, if you will?
Yeah. So, a little backstory. There were moments in my first 3 years of when I had the cart. There were a lot of property managers that reached out during COVID and 2021, 2022, that were presenting me amazing opportunities to have a shop in their location. And there were moments where I was very like, oh, I think we could do it now. Let's do it now. Let's do it now, you know? And I ran it by shout out to my older sister, Elizabeth. She said something that really resonated with me. And she said, I told her, it was actually around Thanksgiving. I said, I think I want to open up another shop. I want to open up a shop here. And she said, you know, Raoul, what's the rush? There's so many factors right now that it's like, I think you have a good consistency with events and the services and offices. Just keep that and have that grow into a bigger, once you have a snowball, then you're able to take that piece and then be able to feed that into a shop. And that really resonated with me. And I waited until the right opportunity. First brick and mortar shop that I picked out, it's located in Bucktown, Milwaukee and Levitt, and it formerly was a tea shop. And I used to go as a regular customer at this tea shop, and I love the aesthetics. I loved the what they were presenting in regards to customer experience, and I felt like I wanted if I were to have a coffee shop, this is what this tea shop could look like. And so I was close friends with the business owner at the time, and when he was planning to close up, he sent me the opportunity and kind of gave me, hey, here's the landlord's number. Feel free to reach out. And I said, okay, like this was the perfect spot that I wanted to do it at, because I felt like that reflected really well of my brand. It reflected really well of my mission, and it matched kind of like my coffee cart was white. This brick and mortar is majority of it is really white and brick, and I felt if it was kind of like a big mothership and I had little spaceships of coffee carts that would come out, I felt like they all matched pretty well. And so I saw this as a great opportunity. I negotiated the lease and was able to work and do the numbers and say, okay, well, this is how much we're generating in catering. This is how much we're generating in office services. Okay, and it took us about 2-3 years to figure this out. I would say I knew 60% of how to manage a coffee bar, because between those first in those 3 years, we were doing residential pop-ups. So we were learning through the thick of it of like, okay, if we were to have a coffee shop, these are the hurdles. And supplies and inventory and all those things. And now that we had the brick and mortar, I was able to utilize some of the resources that I collected um, throughout those pop-up residential nuggets of wisdom and apply that into the shop.
Great. So, what was that experience then initially when you had to consider the challenges? Did
Yeah.
they come through like you thought they would when you started the brick and mortar? And what were the things that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah. Um, I'm not gonna lie. There were not things that I was like, oh, I know for a fact this is gonna work. No, I think it's the entrepreneur in you, it's the business owner in you, it's the ambitious side of you that's like, you know what, I want to take this risk and I want to see if this will work. And so having a brick and mortar, I wasn't nervous about the foot traffic. Over the course of 3 years, we grew our social media. We had regulars that would visit us at pop-ups, at storefronts, that we would collaborate. I would collaborate with local business owners and be like, "Hey, you want to have a little coffee cart in front of your storefront?" And I built these regulars over time, that when we announced that we were going to have a brick and mortar, people supported us from different neighborhoods. It was great. It was awesome. And I was confident in that part. Well, the things that I wasn't confident was, weather. We're very dependent on weather when it comes to the brick and mortar location. The city of Chicago right now currently are installing bike lanes in front of a lot of these popular streets, and so the
Mm,
convenience of parking in front of your car, in front of the shop, really plays a role, in coming in, and I think it's just we live in I could say in the city of Chicago, we live in a time where, it's convenient. Uber Eats, DoorDash. If it's raining, I want to get coffee from somewhere else, instead of going out to them. And so those are things that I didn't think, and I didn't know how we can control those variables. But yeah, so there were a few elements of surprise there. The last thing I will have to say is the people management. I have strengths and weaknesses, and that's one thing to learn is like managing a team healthy and encouraging them, empowering them, making the right choices as a leader. It's not just about the product. It's just not about just coffee. It's also about managing your staff well.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that was going to be my next question here was the idea of going from a part-time staff and mobile operations and dispatching people, and now you've got a brick and mortar, same people all the time, same cafe all the time, customers, same customers.
Yeah.
So it can be a challenge because things start to kind of bleed into one another, and you've got to manage a different way. And you change too as a person. Like you have to rise up to the challenge yourself. So, what changed in the way that you needed to manage people in the brick and mortar versus the mobile operation?
That's good. Yeah. So again, this is where I would say your episodes really help. There's some certain episodes of that talk about how to manage individuals and managing and rising up leaders in your cafe space, the power of team management. And there were moments where I'm like, man, I'm going on a traffic. I'm going to listen to Keys to the Shop. So there are definitely amazing episodes that I would want to explore. But in regards to the original five that I brought on, I'm very proud to say that two out of the five individuals are still with us to this day. In fact, it was one of the two was this was their last year as life is progressing and they're ready to settle down. But I was grateful and glad to still keep retention and contextually of where we're at as a business. I recently announced that we are releasing our benefits program, our insurance program, for now W two employees, and so it's a lot of mind blowing shift from 1099 to actual now legitimate employment in the way that I've seen it before done, and now we're doing it, and so it's been great on the back end infrastructure. Shout out to we use Homebase. Homebase is a great payroll system that we haven't had any complaints about. The Yeah, so I think that definitely goes pretty far in regards to relationships. I'm a social guy. I love connecting with people. I love going to being able to host parties and connect with folks. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to build that relation. I wanted a team that can represent not just for me but just represent the brand and my mission. And so our onboarding for interviews were a little bit competitive. I truly believe that you can train somebody very well on how to be a barista, how to do all the mechanisms of behind the bar. It's hard to shift them from their old habits, and that translates to customer service. And so, thankfully, we've been having amazing personalities. I currently have about 9 people on staff, and four out of the nine are full timers. And so yeah, it's one of those things. Um, I'm not the manager, not anymore. I learned that the hard way. What I ended up doing
Mm.
was, I needed to know my strengths and weaknesses. And where I thrived well was I love big picture. I love just going out there and really, trying to scale the business. And so there was one person, shout out to Nadia. She was always the most vocalist in the team. Every time we had a staff meeting, she would always raise her hand, give her 2 cents. I was getting a little bit almost nervous or being around her because I know she always had very strong opinions on how we needed to operate the back end of a coffee shop. So what I ended up doing was I said, "Hey, do you want to be the manager of the shop?" And she's like, "Yes." And I kid you not, it's been such a game changer operation wise behind the shop. She's just been doing an amazing job. And so I'm very thankful to have someone like her to really spearhead that and be the problem solver.
Well, that's really great that you have a good team and that Also, you were able to come to this point of, I know you said you learned the hard way, and sometimes those moments can force you to do it, but even in the face of evidence, sometimes people still don't learn and don't act on that knowledge, and they just doggedly stick with like, no, 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 I'm just gonna like, hire people that will sort of acquiesce to my weaknesses rather than, try to shift things in myself, even shift myself as the owner. So I think that speaks well of you that you could take that and say, I can't be the manager of this. Somebody else should be, so I'll be big picture. It's good self awareness. In So then you have to then just kind of take the big picture of where the business is going and kind of oversee those three different income streams, those expressions of your business and the people in it. So now you're managing a smaller team of people, not like all the baristas, but the leaders in these various areas. How do you do that in terms of being overseer or big picture? What's the best way that somebody could be big picture effectively?
Right. Well, so it is one, just taking on a lot of mentors to kind of like learn from them, and also just learning how to be a team player. So for myself, I have two individuals that really help me. Nadia is one of them that really helped me oversee a lot of the business back end. So we have a manager, and then we have somebody who makes sure that our coffee carts. Thankfully, I have two now, and we have three sets of equipment, and we're working on bar number three, to go and dispatch and schedule events and catering and all these things. And so we meet once a week, every Wednesday, and if there's an event that lands on a Wednesday, we push it, or we try to bring it early. A lot of these
Hmm.
events that I line up are about a month out, and so I really try to communicate, over communicate, as much as we possibly can. We use Slack as a team, as an app to stay internal comms, and then it's also just like reminding everybody on the vision. When we do staff meetings, we don't do staff meetings every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. I would say we do a staff meeting once every 2 months, and when we do a staff meeting, we provide presentation slides, and we're showing, I want to showcase numbers. This is where we were at, this is what we're looking at. We want to make open up the space, and then at the end of it all, it's like I want to remind everybody on the mission. I want to remind everybody on the where we're going, where we came from. Inspire them. We have a couple baristas that have the fire to open up their own shop, and so I really try to like let them know, like, I would hope that you're here with us for a long time, but also at the same time, I hope that this would, add fuel to the fire and learn for you. Like, keep this, like, you learn from it. In regards to staffing, we diverse. In regards to experience, I bring on maybe two or three well-seasoned baristas, and then everyone else are more kind of are in their less than a year, 2 years, and they want to learn a little bit more, so that there is some type of leadership within that staffing where they can learn from one another. I think it wouldn't. I think it is tricky to have a lot of seasoned baristas from different backgrounds and different habits to break. Whereas you can, have a couple that can teach others and really press into what they want. So in our interviews, I asked them, "What would you like to do?" And we'll have some that will say, "Well, we want to have a coffee shop. I want to have a coffee shop, or I want to be an educator in coffee." Great. I want to tap into that and try to see how we can bring that into the business and allow them to be seen, allow them to be valued, and allow to have them be heard.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And you can tell the energy you're putting into this. And I think that's such a game changer for a lot of people who, you know, the transparency that you're getting out there, people don't get that from other jobs.
Mhm.
You're sounding like this is a place where people are included in the trajectory, in the plans, and what's happened. And for a lot of people, if you want to talk about like disgruntled baristas, and the industry is one of the main industry problems. A lot of it comes from this isolation, this feeling like you're in the dark about a lot of things, but you're pouring a lot of effort into providing your labor in a shop to provide. services on behalf of the company. And so, I love hearing about that kind of thing. One, what would you say here? And this will be my final question to you about advice. I mean, advice is always a hard question for me to ask because there's so much to talk about, right? And I think so much of what you shared is really going to help people. But for folks that are on a similar path as yours, maybe they're in a mobile situation and they're going to transition to brick and mortar, or maybe they just want to run a brick and mortar that is engaging, refreshingly bright, and so forth. What do you find yourself saying, and what would you say today to people to really set them on the right course for success?
Yeah. So I truly believe that, you know, if you were to want, if you wanted to open up a brick and mortar, it's always good to do everything in reverse. Such as, if you, I don't know if I would be able to handle a shop if I didn't, if I was never a manager, if I never did the, the pop-ups, if I never did, moving the cart around. I think if we just be patient, if you have the vision, you have a very competitive business plan. There's so many online that you can look up, and they'll ask you all these tedious questions, but it's so good because it helps you catch all the blind spots, things that you didn't think about. And if I, so having the cart and doing all that in reverse, the cart,
Yeah.
resident pop-ups, partnerships with corporate clients or with organizations, and then eventually now launching the shops, it really sets you up for success because now you have context, you have history, you have experience to some degree, and not only that, but now you have brand awareness. I didn't feel like we had to be nervous on grand opening and put out a lot of marketing flyers to say, hey, new coffee shop in the block, come visit. We didn't have to have that. We already built that demand, and so there is that. There's always some, there's that question that always says, like, if you were to do it, would you do it all over again? And for me, it's a tough question to answer because some part of me, there are days where I'm like, yeah, for sure. And then there are days where I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't think I could do it again. But I'm glad I took it. Because the reality is, coffee starts off as a hobby. It starts off as a passion, and it's to some, it's used for, like, it's a morning ritual. When you want to create a business out of it, that hobby becomes a responsibility now. So the passion is no
Mm.
longer, it's different. It's a duty. And so there are days where I was like, man, I have to put my emotions aside. I have to be present with my colleagues, or I just have to, if there's anything that's happening outside of work, life happens. Okay, how do you grieve well? How do you maintain your emotional intelligence and all those things, and self-care, because it's not about you. It's also now about the team. It's about employment. It's about creating more jobs. It's a lot of these bigger picture things, and so it becomes a responsibility. And so it's always trying to remind yourself of, like, why are you doing this? I love going to the coffee shop. I sit there as a regular, and I love to see people chit-chatting, and it's a really beautiful thing. For me, it's wholesome, and I love that. It keeps me grounded. I'm not just like, only about business, but I'm also about relationships, and so, that's one of the things, that I'm very thankful for. So at the end of the day, it's those two things, those two key components. It's just being patient, start in reverse, start small, and then grow from there. And once you have, like, these lines of consistency, pivot off of that. And then it's also just really take into account on the sacrifice and the labor sum and all those things. I will end with this part, is where they say, oh, I can't wait to get out of my 9 to 5 and start my own business. That's great. You start
Yeah.
your own business. It's no longer 9 to 5. It's a 24/7. So it's one of those things you have to take into account.
Wow. Well said. I love so much of this focus on reality checks, relationships, the shift into business focus, and then it all kind of speaks to the depth of experience that you discover when you take these calculated risks. And I like the idea of starting in reverse and developing yourself and the concept along the way. And you've done such a great job with that. So, Raul, it's been an honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate all the wisdom you've shared with us today. How can people stay in touch with all you offer there at Third Coffee?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for allowing me to get on here. So yeah, you can support us or just be able to share some love by just going on our social media. We always like to be a little bit creative there. We throw out some fun videos. So it's Third Coffee, THRD, Coffee. Co on our Instagram, or you can find us on Facebook at the same THRD Coffee. And then also just being able to, if you're in the Chicago area, come by Milwaukee and Levitt, 1816 North Milwaukee. We're there 6 days a week. We're closed on Mondays. But yeah,
Awesome. Raul, again, thank you. This was great.
thank you, Chris. Appreciate you.
Okay, everybody. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Raul. Really great insights on building this business and growing this business in a way that is serving its staff and serving the community well. And I just love Raul's entrepreneurial spirit. So, huge thank you, Raul. We really appreciate you being on the show, sharing. Thank you for being a fan of the show. Keep up the amazing work. If you want to be plugged into everything related to Third Coffee, two places you can go. Of course, on Instagram, it's Third Coffee Co. at Third Coffee Co. So it's third without the I. So it's THRD. So Third Coffee Co. on Instagram. And then thirdcoffee.com is their website. And if you're in Chicago and you want to make it out to get some great coffee and great service at these places, definitely check out Third Coffee. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm also here to just have conversation with you. If you're interested in key holder coaching groups in 2025, send me an email. Let's have a conversation. We're starting to build our lists for applications to be sent out to be a part of that group. Also, beyond these key holder coaching group, mastermind groups, we have the consulting and coaching that I do one-on-one with operators to really fine-tune their hospitality, culture, quality, and operations of their business is something hugely valuable, and I think would be something that we should probably talk about, you and I. So if you're interested in that, email chris@keystotheshop.com, and I can't wait to hear from you. And with that, that is the end of our episode, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate you all, as always. Don't forget to follow the show on social media. Don't forget to share the show with your friends, your family, your colleagues, etc. It really helps out a lot. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.